Welcome back to Kings of the North, poolside at the Tiki Bar, 66 degrees here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Doug Lesmerises live at the Orange Bowl, and from balmy Dallas, where neither the weather nor the Wi-Fi is cooperating, Bill Landis. Landis, how are you, man?
I'm good. I turned on the news this morning and they said the real field temperature in the Dallas-Fort Worth area was 19 degrees. So it's supposed to get a little warmer here. No precipitation today. There was the one thing I was worried about. So Ohio State's flying in later on this evening. Texas, I think, will be here about 4 o'clock local time. And I wondered if there would be any precipitation that might impact that travel. It doesn't seem like there's going to be. So, and the forecast keeps changing, I think, a little bit for the better, but it is still quite cold here.
Yeah. Thanks to you guys for being here. Tell a friend. We appreciate you guys subscribing and watching and listening to Kings of the North. Just as a heads up to like people who are running bowls, the number one thing these days that people need is good Wi-Fi. And Bill has crawled all over his hotel in Dallas. He has tried every possible signal and he's blurry. And I am crystal clear, just like the waters here in the pool. Oh, mama. So we're just going to do the best we can, Landis, but like this is not our fault. This is the digital world, and then not every bowl is prepared for it.
Nope. Maybe one day Dallas will get internet. We'll see.
Is it on the grid? Is the internet on the grid? Is that part of the issue, that the whole thing is just like they're kind of like they're in the 1880s there? We're going to talk about what James Franklin and Marcus Freeman said at the morning news conference here at the Orange Bowl. We're going to do a big game breakdown and give our picks for Penn State, Notre Dame. And then tomorrow we're going to do the same thing for Texas, Ohio State in that bowl. It is funny, Landis. Like the teams aren't even in your city yet. It feels like the Orange Bowl is one day earlier than the Cotton Bowl, but it feels like they're like a day and 3 quarters ahead of things. Like it's wild to me that like James Franklin and Marcus Freeman are like, hey, we're ready for the game tomorrow. And like Ohio State's practicing in Columbus like later today before they even get on the plane.
It is weird. Like I get why they split the games up. Actually, I don't really get why they split the games up, but they have split the games up. So like we figured that would be the case. But yeah, the timing seems out of sync here. But I think like Penn State and Notre Dame did arrive in South Florida on the same timeline that Texas and Ohio State I think are going to arrive here in North Texas. But I feel a little stuck in limbo here. Like the media stuff is like up and running today, which was good because yesterday I got here like you wouldn't know the Cotton Bowl was happening. So it feels a little different in that way. But yeah, still waiting for the teams to get here. It's a bit odd.
Okay. Marcus Freeman and James Franklin talked this morning. And guess what, guess what phrase came out of James Franklin's mouth this morning, Bill Landis?
Kings of the North?
Kings of the North. Mike, let's run it. When I asked James Franklin about the fact that last year, Michigan won the national title. Previous to that, 19 of the 20 national titles had been won by Southern teams, most of them in the SEC. Are we seeing a world where the North can compete? This is what James Franklin said to my question. First, this is Doug Lesmerises from Kings of the North. Michigan obviously won the national.
I like the Kings of the North. It's perfect.
Thank you for saying that, James. Michigan won the national title last year. Before that, 19 of 20 national champions had been from warmer weather or Southern schools, most of them in the SEC. 3 cold weather schools in the semifinals here. With NIL, the portal, the 12-team playoff, do you believe there's something happening that will allow northern schools like Penn State, Notre Dame to compete at the very top of the sport, maybe even more effectively than in the past 2 decades?
Well, first of all, you described us as a cold weather team. I don't know if I necessarily would describe us that way in recruiting. We don't really sell it that way. I will say this, I was a little apprehensive this year. For the first time, we had our mid-year guys come in early, and it's turned out to be a real positive. I'd be very comfortable doing it moving forward. I think we had 3 guys from Florida show up, and we have gotten more snow in the last 2 weeks than I can remember in a long time in Pennsylvania. So they're kind of looking at me right now like, this isn't what you sold us on. But I think at the end of the day, you look at college football and you look at the history, and obviously a place like Notre Dame and Penn State, tremendous history. And I think there are some changes going on right now. What that is specific to, I'm not necessarily sure. I don't know if there's enough data points and enough information to kind of make a strong statement on it. But as we all know, there's been a ton of changes in college football, really over the last 5 years, probably more so than maybe in the 25 years before it. And the programs that are embracing that, the programs that are being creative and aggressive, and I also think a really important word is being bold and aggressive, which is what we're trying to do, then I think it's helping. And those things are showing up. And you look at the playoffs right now, college football playoffs, there's a ton of teams. I also think it's good for college football that there's more teams represented, there's more parts of the country represented, and it's not kind of the same old story. So not exactly sure. We'll have a better idea maybe a couple of years from now, but I do think it's a good storyline for college football right now.
We can make a commercial out of that, right? Like James Franklin saying Kings of the North. I like that. We'll make a commercial.
I think if you make your way around the country to press conferences and just talk with coaches and just have them say Kings of the North back to you, yeah, we can make a nice little cut up of that. Make it the show intro.
I did that one time when I was in college. I went to a Cubs game for the student radio station I was working for, and I just made like people around the Cubs say the name of our student radio station so I could make it into like a little cut up and have it in between. I had Harry Carey say it. It was like,
oh, nice.
You're listening to 89.3 W. And then I lost it. I gathered all this sound and made this cut up, and then I like deleted it somehow. So anyway, I hopefully won't delete the James Franklin thing. This is the thing that still happens, Landis. With our concept, what usually happens is you ask somebody about it. They say, I don't know what you mean by that. I'm not sure about that. And then in the course of the rest of their answer, they explain the exact concept and acknowledge that they know exactly what we're talking about. And then at the end, they wrap up with, but I don't know that it means anything. And it's like, yes, it does mean something. We're okay to have to explain it to you, but I don't know why people are. There's still like a little afraid. And then like off to the side, they'd be like, oh, yeah. Because like we know what all the stuff is. But even the idea of, hey, don't call us a cold weather school because we had all these guys from the South that we recruited that had got them to come to Penn State and then it snowed. That's the whole point. Because that's not something Dabo Swinney has to deal with. It's not something that Alabama and Georgia and LSU have to deal with. Like, hey, welcome to campus in January. We're glad you're here for spring football. I hope you brought your snow boots. So like, it's like you sort of don't get it, but you actually do get it, don't you? They get it, Landis. They get it.
They get it. The problem is they don't have swords, right? They can't. They're not swinging their swords around yet. Like they want, like James Franklin said, he wants. That thing comes out. I know you gotta keep your head on the swivel. Oh God.
It's windy here, so I brought my bald cap to put the swords inside of, so the swords won't blow away. Oh. Sorry to interrupt.
That's the sheath. I like the ball cap sheath. Who knew? Is he there, by the way? Is Paul Okebom there?
Josh Pate's here. Have not seen Paul Okebom yet.
Okay.
I'll say hello.
No, I think there is, not to undermine the point of the show, there's probably a little bit of truth in what James Franklin said about wanting a couple more years worth of data points on this thing to see if the sport is actually shifting. But I think you and I believe that it is, and it has. But James Franklin, I don't think is going to go out there and pound his chest and say the North owns college football just yet. But maybe next year, maybe if Penn State wins the national title, he'll do it.
Yeah. The other big thing that came up was a lot of injury stuff on both sides of the ball. Well, not a lot of injury stuff. 2 injury things with 2 of the very best players in this game. Jeremiah Love, the Notre Dame running back. Marcus Freeman was asked about that. Said like he's not 100%, but who's 100%? Just like a little. We all know that he's dealing with something in his knee. He was only played like 17 snaps in the last game. He's clearly limited. Has been maybe not all the way there in practice. Marcus Freeman did in the answer today say like they have to be careful with him in practice. I don't know. It didn't feel like great vibes around Jeremiah Love. So I think we just have to keep that in mind. Again, Mike Denbrock, the offensive coordinator, said yesterday that he will play. I don't think anybody's under the illusion that he's going to be 100%. So I think we have to have that in our analysis when we get to the big game breakdown. And then the other part of this is Abdul Carter, the Penn State edge rusher, linebacker, do-it-all defensive player, number 2 on Mel Kiper's draft board. James Franklin did get asked about Abdul Carter, and this is what he said about that.
Ask you guys, there's a couple questions about the health of the Notre Dame team. I was going to hope you guys would ask more questions so we could figure some of that stuff out. Yeah, we anticipate Abdul playing. He's doing everything he possibly can to play. His approach has been awesome. He's lived in the training room, but it'll be a game time decision, and we'll see. But just like the guys that we're looking at on the Notre Dame roster and concerned about their impact on the game, Abdul's one of those guys as well. So I get the question, and I understand where it's coming from, but Abdul's approached this the right way. He wants to play. He's put a ton of like cryptic messages out on social media, which you guys have probably seen those. I learn as much from those as I do from our trainers. But we are hopeful and expecting Abdul to play, and we'll see. We'll see how that plays out.
I do feel like this, Bill. So my guess would be at the moment, you'll get a pretty good version of Abdul Carter, and you'll get a not himself version of Jeremiah Love. That feels like where things are. I do think this game is close enough that if we're being really black and white about it, if Abdul Carter's playing and Jeremiah Love is not, then I think I might pick Penn State. If Jeremiah Love was playing and Abdul Carter was not, then I think I might pick Notre Dame. Do you think that those two players are that important to this game, that how close they are to 100%, their impact on the game could actually swing it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think Jeremiah Love is Notre Dame's best offensive player, and Abdul Carter is clearly Penn State's best defensive player. You're a little more optimistic, I think, on Carter than I am, just because I don't know about that arm injury, as we talked about last night, how much that might limit him. Clearly, Jeremiah Love hasn't been himself in this entire playoff. He had that one long run against Indiana, the 98-yard touchdown, but hasn't done much outside of that. He just doesn't look comfortable and seems to be getting like more and more injured and worn down as this thing goes on. So, Jadarian Price is there to help pick up that slack. They'll probably need more for Notre Dame because it wants to run the ball in this game. I think as good as Abdul Carter is, perhaps Penn State is better positioned to figure out a way around his absence if he's out or if he's not 100% himself. Then I don't know that you can replicate like this speed and the big game breaking ability of Jeremiah Love if you're Notre Dame.
Yeah, Aeneas Williams has helped them as a third down back. I mean, he's become more involved as Jeremiah Love has been out. Jadarian Price is very good, but that has kind of been a thing for them, breaking those big runs. And Price can do it, but it's going to be hard. It's really going to be difficult for them to loosen something up. And again, not play in a phone booth. There's so many things here that are similar about these teams. So let's start getting into the breakdown. I mean, it was a nice news conference. James Franklin and Marcus Freeman clearly have a lot of respect for each other. Very friendly. So, good vibes, good Northern vibes down here. They had to pose with an orange and, do all the kind of stuff you have to do. Let's talk about that matchup, because I do think one of the things when we talk about Marcus Freeman and James Franklin, Riley Leonard said this yesterday, that he hasn't been around a coach like Marcus Freeman because he said he almost feels like one of the players, like he's just maybe like a player who's injured who can't play, because he's like dapping him up and asking him about just like hanging out with him as players. But then also he said, but we also respect him and we understand he's our leader, and it's just such an unusual relationship. And I said, is it just because he's young? Or is it his personality? He said, I think it's his personality, just like how he is. But like Riley Leonard was sort of wide-eyed about it, like how rare like this kind of is for this. And for instance, he cited that Marcus Freeman has relayed a lot about his personal life to the team at times after the Northern Illinois loss. He said, he talked about when he was a player and very difficult losses and how that made him feel. And I think there's just like a really personal connection that coaches do it a lot of different ways, but I think it is a factor in the culture and the community of this Notre Dame team. And so I do think I think there's something happening with Notre Dame. It doesn't mean something's not happening with Penn State, but Marcus Freeman is still so young. He was facing pressure after the Northern Illinois loss, but I think Marcus Freeman is still early enough in his career that he faces micro pressures, where James Franklin, 11 years at Penn State, now you face macro pressures. Mm-hmm. Now you face big picture stuff. Have you gotten it done on this level? And I wonder in this coaching matchup, especially what we saw with Marcus Freeman and Kirby Smart, the decisions that Notre Dame made, their ability, as we said, to sort of be consistent, be fundamental, and then let it rip when need be. For instance, with the running the guys off from the punt team and getting that penalty on Georgia, versus has Penn State done that in big games, but yet bringing in Andy Kotelnicki was all about getting more explosive plays this season. I'm saying a lot of words, Landis, to get to this. Do people think Notre Dame has a coaching edge here? That if one of these coaches is going to get their team over the top in this game, it's going to be Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame?
I think so. I don't know that James Franklin has alleviated the concerns about some of his conservative approaches in big games, right? Because this bracket came out and it's boy, Penn State got a good draw having to play SMU and Boise State, and those are good teams, and Penn State played well and won those games. But how many high leverage moments were there where James Franklin had to make the kind of decisions that we've questioned about him in the past when it comes to being a game manager? So this feels more like a game that would help answer some of those questions. And I think until that happens, people aren't going to fully embrace that idea. Meanwhile, and it's funny to hear James Franklin use the word, go out of his way to use the word bold in that answer to your question, because I don't know that his coaching in game has always reflected that. I think as a program builder and I think yes, but on the field for those 4 quarters, I don't know that he's always embodied that. And I think Marcus Freeman probably has done it more. And maybe that's a thing of youth. You don't know any better. You don't know what you don't know. So why not just play with the pedal down all the time? You haven't, I don't know, maybe been scarred the way that James Franklin has been in some games. Mm-hmm. that leads to coaching conservatively. But does Notre Dame have a coaching edge? I don't know. Maybe I feel that way a little bit. I don't know that it's tremendous, because James Franklin, while Penn State is in uncharted territory here, is supremely more experienced than Marcus Freeman, and I do think that matters. And they both have good coordinators. I think they're both well coached teams. So if there's a coaching edge, I think it's a minor one, and it's mostly encapsulated in some of the aggressiveness we've seen from Marcus Freeman in some of these special teams sort of situations. But Penn State, I think, has also been a little different this year. They had the fake punt up in Minnesota right toward the end of the year. I don't know that that's something that James Franklin would have always done. So I think James Franklin is evolving a little bit, but people aren't really going to wrap their arms around that idea, I think, until we see it in a game like this one tomorrow night.
I got a big picture question to ask you in a second, but let's drill down on this matchup a little bit, Mike, with the graphic. Marcus Freeman versus James Franklin. This came up during the news conference this morning. James Franklin said he admired Marcus Freeman's hairline because James Franklin is 52 and Marcus Freeman is 38. This is Marcus Freeman's 3rd full year at Notre Dame, year 11 for James Franklin. James Franklin, it was a big deal. He got his 100th career win in the home game against SMU in the playoff. They announced that at that game. I was at that game. 101-41. Marcus Freeman 32-9. And then versus the top 10, Marcus Freeman 4-4. I actually think he's 4-5, but I did not count the bowl loss when he took over for Brian Kelly and then had to coach the bowl that first year. That didn't feel fair to me. Hey, here's a loss in the top 10. You can't be top 10 teams. They lost Oklahoma State 4-4. James Franklin 4-19. So, that's part of this. You're talking about scars, Landis. Marcus Freeman and James Franklin have the same number of top 10 wins. James Franklin has 15 more losses. And the thing that I think you point to here is certainly James Franklin has that win over Penn State in 2016, but Notre Dame is coming off the kind of win against Georgia that Notre Dame really hadn't had in a long time, and really Penn State hasn't had in a very long time. That sort of redefining, hey, we can hang. I think Penn State could have done to Georgia what Notre Dame did, but they didn't get the opportunity. Instead, it's like, oh, Penn State and the easy path. But I'm wondering, like, that might just be us, though. I actually don't know that matters to the teams. That just might be like a podcast thing of like, hey, how about that great win for Notre Dame? Penn State just hasn't had the opportunity. Like, they had the other opportunity against Oregon, didn't get it done, but played well. Had the opportunity against Ohio State this year, didn't get it done, but hung in. But like Notre Dame in their moment got it done. So 4 wins each.
Yeah, and I think that's I just don't know because even the Penn State win against Ohio State was so long ago, right? It's like
so long.
You don't take it off of James Franklin's resume, but it's like I don't know. That was a weird game, and we're going on almost a decade since it happened. It's like, but that's the thing you point to in James Franklin's background, I guess, is an indication. Like, yeah, maybe he can get Penn State over the hump in games like this one, whereas like Marcus Freeman has one very fresh in your mind. Marcus Freeman's lost to Ohio State twice.
Sure.
The first one, understandably so. The second one, Notre Dame probably should have won that game with a pretty big blunder at the end of it. So they have some similar blemishes, I think, on their resumes. It's just that Marcus has not been around as long as James Franklin for us to examine that quite as much. But I think it's like combination of a little bit of still being an unknown, like youthful energy, and just coming off of the big Georgia win, I think would lead a lot of people probably to favoring Marcus slightly over James Franklin in this game.
Let me ask a big picture question here as it relates to Notre Dame and Penn State and these two coaches. Because again, we go back and forth here on KOTN. Sometimes it's an SEC conversation. Sometimes it's, and then sometimes I'm reading some stuff in the chat about the Georgia win, like characterizing whether it's a good win over Georgia. People view it as a good win. Like I knew Georgia was mid and they played the backup quarterback, but still there's a lot of people who be like, I can't believe Notre Dame beat Georgia. So that's what the view on that is. Like, but we also can't play this game. Yeah, I can say Georgia's mid. They're number 2. They're the SEC champ. So we are not going to play the game of like, well, it doesn't matter because it's wrong. That is not the game we're playing here. That's a good win for Notre Dame. It's not Notre Dame's fault that Georgia's mid. It's not the North's fault that the South is mid. It's still a good win. We're not going to do that. If this is a South intruder, they're coming in to be like, well, it's not even a good Georgia team. That is not for real. The South is going to go from we rule the sport to like, oh, well, we aren't even that good. Wrong. In 2013, the last time I was here at the Orange Bowl, Clemson beat Ohio State. And that was the beginning. That was just as the Dabo Clemson thing was getting going. That was Taj Boyd. That was not yet Deshaun Watson. That was not yet Trevor Lawrence. That was not yet national championship Clemson, but that was on the lookout. Here they come, Clemson. They had Chad Morris as their offensive coordinator. He's $1 million coordinator. That was a big thing. I wrote about that year. Like you could see something coming, but they weren't all the way there. So when we talk about the SEC in the South, I don't know that when I look at Notre Dame and Penn State, that I would ever be expecting Notre Dame and Penn State to be Georgia or Alabama. The way I think you can expect Ohio State and probably Michigan to be Georgia or Alabama, or Oregon to be Georgia or Alabama, right? That if we're doing that from an SEC and Big Ten perspective, I think it's probably Georgia, Alabama, Texas, Ohio State, Michigan, Oregon. I don't want to get bogged down in that, but I want to make the point here. I don't know that Penn State or Notre Dame with the win here, whether it propels them to that. But they can be Clemson. Why can't they be Clemson? And so it's not that you are an SEC like peak resources, peak recruiting juggernaut like that, but you can be a national championship contender. You can do it your way. And that was the beginning. So I think it's possible. Here we are, 2013 Orange Bowl. Now 2024 Orange Bowl. I know it's 2025. 11 years later, could this be propulsive for Notre Dame or Penn State? That's started Clemson on a path to win 2 national championships in the next 5 years and go toe-to-toe with Alabama. What do you think of a Clemson comparison with where these two programs are and where we might look back and see what this game did for them and where they might be in 5 years?
Yeah, I think from a resources standpoint, it makes more sense than comparing them to the Ohio States, Michigans, Alabama's, Georgia's. Because there was like it's funny, like Michigan won the national title and we were like waiting for the and not even winning a national title. Michigan started getting to the playoff, and we were waiting for that to like sort of change Michigan's recruiting profile. And I don't know that you necessarily say it has done that, but it definitely did that for Clemson. Clemson all of a sudden, like after winning those titles, was in contention for 5-star prospects and like taking small classes, but still getting pretty high profile players in a way that I don't think it was doing before. So I think this could do that for Penn State and Notre Dame. I think there's an easier pathway too now with the 12 team playoff, and even more so if it becomes a 14 team playoff than Clemson would have had. So yeah, I think it's right. I think both these programs stand, even the loser of this game, I think now that it's in the semifinal, stands a reasonable, if not highly likely, chance of elevating itself like in the college football pecking order, just like in the eyes of talent acquisition, like from the perspective of talent acquisition, right? Like to say like we got to the semifinal. I think this is going to change things for a lot of teams, right? It's your point about being able to hang banners for making the playoff. I just think that changes the perception of your program. And these two programs are already operating at a pretty high level, but to get to this point, even if you don't win a national title, I think this has already been propulsive for them.
Yeah. The other thing relating to Marcus Freeman and James Franklin, it was the first question asked at the news conference. 2 black head coaches going head-to-head here in the semifinal. It means we're going to have a black head coach in the national championship game. They had been asked about that previously. They were asked about it again. James Franklin came ready. And James Franklin had cited this previously, the Super Bowl between Tony Dungy as the coach of the Colts and Lovie Smith as the coach of the Bears, I believe in 2007. As a young coach, he was the offensive coordinator at Kansas State then. He said that mattered to him. He said there was a lot of conversation within the industry of like, look at these 2 black head coaches in the Super Bowl. It matters. And I think like, certainly you and I are not the foremost experts on this. But I think to me, all of this is, does it matter to the people? Does it matter to the people that are involved in it? And it does. So then it's worth talking about. And I can remember this, Bill, and you certainly lived through this. This was a big conversation with black quarterbacks in the NFL for a while. And when I was around the Philadelphia area 2 decades ago and Donovan McNabb as a black quarterback, that was still a very big conversation in football circles. And it took a while. We still were having people saying Lamar Jackson should play receiver in the NFL, right? And like now I think that conversation is over. I was just counting them in my head in the shower this morning. I think it's like half of NFL starting quarterbacks right now are African-American. So like I feel like that's not as much of a conversation because the opportunity is there. It's just about opportunity. And as everyone given an opportunity to do this, you see the progress in 2 decades. I'm curious to see where this goes with black head coaches. Marcus Freeman and James Franklin, it is not foremost on their mind. They are asked about it and they acknowledged it. And James Franklin said he had stats. I don't know if he looked them up or someone handed them to him. He said, I guess in 2007, maybe it was, there were 6 of 127 head coaches who were black in FBS. And right now there's 16 of 134. Now 16 of 134 is whatever it is, 12%. Mm-hmm. The latest stats, about 55% of college football players are black. And so 55% players black, 12% head coaches black. That's not the same. So I think we still have a ways to go, but they acknowledge there's something here and that they hope that there is something for young black coaches in the business. They look up and they see James Franklin and Marcus Freeman sitting at that dais together. Like it matters. It does matter. And I think it's at least worth noting. They thought it was worth noting.
Yeah, I definitely think it matters. It's also, maybe this isn't a fair comparison to make, but it's not lost on me that James Franklin and Marcus Freeman are in this position to perhaps, get a historic win for black head coaches where the NFL coaching cycle just churned out Antonio Pierce and Jared Mayo after 1 year. And it's like,
yep.
Would that have happened? Like, I don't know if that would have happened if there were white coaches, right? So it's not a perfect system. And there's not, I still don't think there's probably equal opportunity for black head coaches. But this could be a seismic moment. Like, I hope that it is. There's a lot of people who deserve coaching opportunities who don't get them for whatever reason. So I know it's really important. Like Marcus Freeman, I think, was quoted out of context after the Sugar Bowl when he was asked about it. But like, I actually thought his answer to that was quite thoughtful after that game as well. But I know there was also a clip floating around of James Franklin, I think from a couple of years ago, might have been even when he got the Penn State job in the first place, where he said that it was very important to him. It was a career goal of his to try to become the first black head coach to win a national title in college football. So it's cool. I'm glad that it's happening. I do think it means a lot to see those two guys sitting up there on that stage together.
Yeah. One of the things this got past me a little bit, and then people were asking about it 11 years ago when Penn State was hiring James Franklin. The other finalist, I think, for that job by the reporting was, you know who it is.
Urban Meyer.
No. Oh, I don't know.
That was before. Yeah, that was before.
Al Golden, who is a former Penn State player, was the head coach at Miami then, and is now Notre Dame's defensive coordinator. So I think it was down to like Al Golden, I guess, interviewed multiple times for it when he was at Miami. And James Franklin got that job. So this is going to lead into, again, to a little bit of this Notre Dame Penn State history. I think this is worth acknowledging again. I talked about it on the show that you and Ari did before the playoff because I wanted to see this game, that they are 9-9-1 all time. The series is tied. So like that is all right. Let's break a tie in the series. Like, hey, that's kind of cool. 9-9-1. They played for the first time more than 100 years ago. I think it was in 1913, I believe they played for the first time. And then they have not played since 2007, I believe. And so like, this is, like you go way, way, way back in the time machine, and they played each other, but they did play in a 12-year period. They played 12 straight years in the 80s and into the 90s. And this is rekindling some of that. And that includes Al Golden as a tight end at Penn State. They played 12 straight years between 81 and 92. Al Golden, every year of his career at Penn State, they played Notre Dame. In 1990, in a 24-21 Penn State win over number 1 Notre Dame, which is the last time Penn State beat number 1, Al Golden caught the game-tying touchdown pass, which is kind of cool. And now James Franklin has talked about him this week as like he's one of us. Like he's he's like a historic Nittany Lion, and now he's the coordinator for Notre Dame. But like Landis, this is like, these are two bangers. Like not in the, again, I think we talked about this before, like in the modern era, they're kind of been defined by what they aren't, that they're a step short of what they once were. But we know what they once were. We know the history of these two teams, and it's not ancient history. There is ancient history. There is history in the 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s that Penn State that really matters. But there's also like stuff like, in my lifetime, at least, when these programs really mattered, and it just reminds you of what they can be again. And I think and they haven't played since 2007. These are teams, again, in the North. Like, I think it'd be great if these teams played more often. But like, this really matters. There's a lot of history here, but it also really matters for the future of the sport.
It does. I thought it was just like, it was kind of striking to see the two helmets next to each other on the table.
Yes.
Like it was like, oh yeah, this is kind of a big deal that Penn State and Notre Dame are not only just merely playing again, but playing again on this stage. Was there anything, I don't like, even like in passing, like talking to Penn State, like I'm wondering now if James Franklin ever considered hiring Al Golden.
Oh,
he's had to hire like to either replace Brent Pryor or replace Manny Diaz.
Yeah, no, I did not. That did not come up that I heard of like Al Golden in consideration for that. That's interesting. I mean, it is, because it's funny here too. I mean, it's like they're Miami people. Like Al Golden, we're in South Florida. Al Golden was the head coach of the Hurricanes. Like it didn't work out. He was like, wearing a tie on the sideline and that kind of stuff. So the other thing here, just a reminder of like the blue blood nature of these programs, and this is just a reminder again for the whole playoff. All-time wins. Both of these teams are top 7 all-time in wins. Notre Dame is tied for 4th with 961 wins in program history, and Penn State is 7th, tied for 7th in NCAA history with 943 wins. And the 4 semifinalists are all in the top 7 all-time wins. Michigan's 1st, Ohio State 2nd, Alabama 3rd, Notre Dame and Texas tied for 4th. Oklahoma 6th, and then Penn State and Yale tied for 7th. So like, that's what, again, like here we are. This is what this sport is giving us in the first year of the 12-team playoff. We have 4 of the all-time top 7 in program victories in the playoff, man. Pretty good.
Shout out to Yale. Didn't know they were
Yeah.
That high. Yeah.
What's like you could say shout out to Yale. I might say, what's up, Yale? What happened? Where you been?
I think, yeah.
Okay.
The rest of the sport caught up to the Ivy League, I think is what happened.
Yeah. I wish I would ask Marcus Freeman and James Franklin about that. All right. I got my swords. I got my bald cap. Let's do a big game breakdown and figure out who's going to win this thing. Next on Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises, Bill Landis back on Kings of the North. Thanks for being here. We will do a big game breakdown on Ohio State, Texas on the Thursday, noon Eastern live show on YouTube. Post game Thursday after the Orange Bowl, Friday after the Cotton Bowl. Join us during the day and at night for everything about Northern Ball. In this game, Landis, Notre Dame is favored by 1.5. The line opened at 1.5. It got as high as Notre Dame favored by 2.5 and is back to 1.5. The total's at 44.5. So it's basically a coin flip. Our guy, Brian Fremeau, his drive to drive ratings for offenses and defenses. We have the 4 best defenses in the country by his ratings in this playoff, by the way, Landis. I don't know if you were aware of that. Notre Dame is 1, Ohio State's 2, Texas 3, Penn State 4 in defense. So by these ratings, Notre Dame 1st in defense, 14th in offense. Penn State 4th in defense, 5th in offense. And my God, Landis, these teams are similar. It's like looking in the mirror.
It's the Spider-Man meme. They're just sitting there pointing at each other. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Have you done that? Do you know how to do a Spider-Man meme? Can you do that for Kings of the North? Can you Spider-Man meme us?
I can probably make one. Yeah.
Wow. That'd be great if you could figure out how to do that. I would like to learn someday how to make a Spider-Man meme. Okay. Both great safeties on both sides of the ball, right? Aiden Schuler and Xavier Watts for Notre Dame, Zakee Wheatley and Jalen Reed for Penn State, right? Really good safeties who can make plays. I think corners you believe in on both sides of the ball, right? Jalen Kimber and AJ Harris for Penn State and Christian Gray and Leonard Moore for Notre Dame. Like, you're not afraid to trust guys in coverage, especially because neither team has game-breaking receivers. Offensive lines have both been through it a little bit, but I think are playing pretty darn good right now. Both teams, 2 guys in the backfield they really believe in. There's a couple things, though, Landis. We talked about the injury thing. I think in the end, as close as they all are, I think all the leans lean toward Penn State a little bit, which is, a little bit is Drew Aller's a little more of a threat to throw it, I think, than Riley Leonard. Ty Warren, I think, is a little bit more of a threat in the receiving game than anybody that Notre Dame has. And I think if Abdul Carter can be himself with Denai Dennis Sutton, with Zane Durant, some people up front, I think Penn State, especially with Riley Mills being out for Notre Dame, I think maybe Penn State is a little more dynamic up front, but so similar otherwise. We'll get into the specifics of both sides of the ball. Do you disagree with where I'm finding maybe tiny edges for the Nittany Lions?
I think if you want to approach it from the perspective of just kind of like dudes, I think Penn State might have some more. I do think Notre Dame is a more sound football team. If you look just precise, not super flashy. They tackle really well. They cover really well. You're not gonna I don't think catch them off guard with a whole lot. You're not going to, I think, be the beneficiary of coverage busts and just wonky plays when you're playing against Notre Dame. So I think that would make up maybe that gap if you want to talk overall talent, draft picks, that kind of stuff. So I don't think you're off base. I think I am officially in the camp of being surprised that Notre Dame is favored, mostly because of the health stuff with Notre Dame.
Okay,
but no, I think I don't know. I don't know how you could like vehemently disagree with anyone who thinks like one of these teams might be slightly better than the other because they're so even.
Red zone touchdown percentage, which we talk about a lot. Hey, there it is. Look at that. Man, is that how fast you can make a meme? That's amazing. Mike made it in 4 seconds. That would take me 4 days. Notre Dame logo on one Spider-Man, Penn State logo on another Spider-Man. I wish I was better at digital stuff. Okay. Someday, off-season project for Doug. That'll be my off-season project, to make a meme as good as Mike made in 11 minutes. 73% offensive red zone TD percentage, which is like, it's exactly the same. They're like 15th and 16th in the nation. So they score 73% of the time. They score touchdowns in the red zone. Defense in the red zone, Penn State has now passed Ohio State. Ohio State had been number one most of the year. Penn State, 39% allowed in the red zone. Notre Dame, 51%. So a tiny edge there, just like a tiny little thing. But again, like so many things where they're similar. Let's get to Penn State offense versus Notre Dame defense. Okay. We'll start there for our breakdown. I start with the run game for Penn State. 34 for 297 against Oregon, 40 carries for 189 against SMU, 41 for 216 against Boise. I thought Nick Singleton was going to take over this playoff. Katron Allen has been awesome in this run. And Andy Kotelnicki was asked about that, and he just sort of said, like, there's times where you block it up and you miss a hole. There's times where the running back does it right and the team misses a block. And he feels like the last couple games, like the line and Allen have been in sync together, that they're making the blocks and he's making the reads. And the result is this: Katron Allen in his last 3 regular season games had 26 carries for 64 yards, 21 yards a game and 2.5 yards per carry. In the Big Ten championship game and the 2 playoff games, he has 42 carries for 324 yards, 108 yards per game, and 7.7 yards per carry. So again, that's 21 to 108 in yards per game, 2.5 to 7.7 in yards per carry. And Nick Singleton, it's not like he's disappeared. He's averaging 94 yards per game in the last 3 games on 36 carries combined. Oregon, SMU, Boise State, Katron Allen, and Nick Singleton, 78 carries, 606 yards, 202 yards per game, 7.8 yards per carry. Landis, like, does the discussion end there? Your eyes were opened. You were on this. The Penn State run game in the second half against Oregon opened your eyes, and they have continued it. Could they dominate the game this way?
I don't know that they could dominate the game this way. I think it's the way they're going to have to win, because I think Notre Dame. We'll talk about Tyler Warren, but I think Notre Dame's going to have some stuff for Tyler Warren that's going to, I think, force Penn State to try to win the game running the ball. They're comfortable doing that. That's how. I mean, Penn State is a run first team. That's how they want to win games. So it's not like you're taking Penn State out of its game necessarily by doing that, but it's like, can Penn State have the consistent success running the ball that it had against Oregon and SMU and Boise State? I think it will be a little more difficult in this game. Notre Dame's run defense has been very good in this playoff. It's just held Georgia to 2.1 yards per carry. I think the linebackers are excellent. And it's not like, again, I mentioned the point of tackling. They're an excellent tackling team, like PFF grade, tackle grade overall. They're 3rd in the country behind Ole Miss and Washington. Katron Allen's been awesome. There's some stuff about Katron Allen and Nick Singleton as it pertains to next year and whether or not Penn State is going to be able to keep both of them. And I think the assumption at the moment is that if they have to make a choice, they're going to choose Nick Singleton because he's a little more dynamic. And it feels like Katron Allen has taken that on now in these last 3 games. Like, oh yeah, you don't think I'm worth paying too? So check this out. He's got 228 yards after contact in the last 3 games, going back to the Big Ten championship game. He's a leading rusher in the playoff with 204 yards over those 2 games. So he's been excellent. He's running through defenders. The O-line's been blocking it well and helping get these guys to the second level. But when they get there, they're just bouncing off guys, running through them, hitting home runs. So it's a lot for Notre Dame to contend with. I come back to the tackling. I think Notre Dame tackles too well for Allen and Singleton to, I would say, like, take over games the way they have in the last couple. Not that they'll be totally ineffective, because I don't think that'll be the case, but I think they'll have to earn it a little more against Notre Dame.
They'll play a bunch of linebackers: Jack Kaiser, Jay Nosberry, Drake Bowen, and the safeties are awesome. The 6 northern safeties in this game, are you kidding me? Jalen Reed's a Key Wheatley at Penn State, Aiden Schuler, Xavier Watts at Notre Dame, and Lathan Ransom and Caleb Downs at Ohio State. Like, you and I could do a safety pod. We could do a week's worth of safety podcast the way these guys are playing. Like, Aiden Schuler had the huge hit that forced the fumble in the Georgia game. It's like brings the lumber, and Xavier Watts is all over the place. So as much as we have talked about it, we've talked about like maybe some tackling issues with the Penn State linebackers. It doesn't exist with Notre Dame. They are going to rally. They are going to tackle. There's some guys who are going to do that for Penn State too. So I think that's a good point. And then those guys also factor into this Tyler Warren conversation, because Tyler Warren continues to be the guy that they are going to target. He has 28 targets in the last 3 games, 17 catches. That leads the team 180 yards. Trey Wallace has been okay. Amari Evans has flashed at times, but this is still a Ty Warren conversation. And it's one of these things, like, you know, and a lot of times we've talked about this with Notre Dame. I remember doing breakdowns like when Notre Dame was playing Ohio State in the regular season a couple of years ago, and you're doing the same kind of thing with the Notre Dame tight ends. And it's like, how are you going to cover these guys? So what they're going to cover them a million different ways, but they're going to have safeties. They're going to have linebackers. They're going to have nickels involved in this. They're going to play man. They're going to play zone. But Notre Dame does have a bunch of guys to throw at Ty Warren. What do you think Notre Dame's going to kind of, you're not going to stop them, but be able to handle Ty Warren a little bit?
I think so. If you look like over the course of the season, Notre Dame's not giving up a ton to tight ends. I thought, you know, it's a different challenge with Tyler Warren, but I thought they did a nice job with Oscar Delp last week against Georgia. I think Schuler's a big part of it. Like, I was just like, oh, they'll just put Xavier Watts on him. But do you really want to take Xavier Watts like out of doing all the things that Xavier Watts does really well? Like, not down to down. So, but they can throw Schuler at him. They can throw Watts at him. I think the linebackers cover reasonably well too for Notre Dame. So I think we saw Ohio State kind of lay that blueprint, which is just like you're going to have to beat us another way. If you're going to have to prove to us that your receivers can beat our corners down the field, that Drew Aller can make aggressive, accurate throws into tight windows, and Notre Dame with the 2 corners, Leonard Moore and Christian Gray, is definitely equipped to do the same. So Tyler Warren's very good. Like, he'll get his. And if Penn State's able to move the ball a little bit and Tyler Warren becomes a viable option in the red zone, where Notre Dame, as you said, defense has been a little less resistant than it has been overall. So that's maybe where he makes the biggest impact. But I would be very surprised if this is a game, unless they're purely manufactured touches, like wildcat run game kind of stuff, that Notre Dame allows Tyler Warren to get like north of double-digit touches in this game. And then if he doesn't, I think Penn State has a hard time scoring.
So Notre Dame was able at times to get critical pressure on Gunnar Stockton in that Georgia wins. Obviously with the R.J. Oben strip sack at the end of the first half that created 7 points in a low-scoring game that was the play of the game for Notre Dame. Junior Tuhalamaka had 4 pressures in that game and really did a nice job off the edge. I wonder if Notre Dame will be able to get the pressure it wants to get on Drew Aller here, though, because I think Nolan Rucci at right tackle has played pretty well since Anthony Donko went out. Drew Shelton at left tackle. They're not great, but I think they're good enough. I don't know. There's a lot of things here. I mean, it's just like Georgia, I think, in the end was vulnerable. They didn't have skill guys that scared you. Like Georgia didn't have a Ty Warren, and the Penn State backs are better than the Georgia backs, and Drew Aller is a better thrower of the ball than Gunnar Stockton. And I actually think in the end, the way that Georgia offensive line played, I mean, they didn't get anything going in the run game. Like Notre Dame's defense did an awesome job in that game, but I think Penn State offensively is better across the board, almost everywhere, compared to Georgia. I do have questions about Notre Dame's ability to pressure Drew Aller. Junior Tuhalamaka played awesome last game. Consistently, though, I wonder.
I have questions about it with a 4-man rush. Maybe not so much with blitzing. And Notre Dame will blitz. Notre Dame blitzed Georgia more than 50% of Gunnar Stockton's dropbacks. And I was looking through, like on Sports Info Solutions, you can separate by game, like pressure rate allowed against blitzes. Against Boise, it was the second highest pressure rate while being blitzed that Penn State has allowed this year. Only Ohio State was higher. So like when Boise blitzed, they actually got after Drew Aller a little bit. And Drew Aller has been average, I would say, like against pressure while being pressured or against the blitz, at least in this playoff compared to the other quarterbacks. So I think Notre Dame can afford to send more bodies to the pass rush because you're just not worried about what's going to happen to you in the passing game, in my opinion. So I think that's probably what it will come down to, is which of these two quarterbacks, Drew Aller or Riley Leonard, end up feeling the least comfortable. But like that being said, Drew Aller's done a pretty good job, I think, of scrambling at times, of extending plays, of being involved in design run. Maybe some of that can keep Notre Dame honest, but I think they're going to try to heat up Drew Aller and see if he can handle the pressure.
Riley Leonard, Notre Dame quarterback, better running it than Drew Aller. Drew Aller, Penn State quarterback, better throwing it than Riley Leonard. But Riley Leonard can throw and Drew Aller can run.
Mm-hmm.
If this is what I've been trying to zero in on, and I want to get to an Aller cut here in a second. But if this is a low-scoring game and it really comes down to like both these teams need their quarterbacks to really like find a way to make some plays to move the ball in the second half and get a touchdown drive going, would you rather bet on Riley Leonard's legs or Drew Aller's arm in a phone booth game if that's what it comes down to?
His legs.
Because it's like I've been sort of thinking as like, well, what, like Drew, that's an edge for Penn State, right? Drew Aller throwing the ball, that's an edge for Penn State. But what if like nobody can throw and it's like a single wing kind of game? Like I do have that in my head that if this is just like, okay, these are two great defenses and Riley Leonard had 3 critical runs that won the game and Drew Aller tried to make 3 critical throws, but Christian Gray and Leonard Moore and Xavier Watson, Aiden Schuler, their coverage was too good. They double teamed Tyler Warren. They got pressure on him. He could like that. If that's what it comes down to.
Are you just describing the Sugar Bowl?
No, I like that's what.
Yeah.
For real. Yeah. Like if that's what it comes down to, right? Riley Leonard didn't throw for 100 yards, but if it comes down to a quarterback has to make a play, well, running counts. And I think Riley Leonard running it is the most dangerous quarterback aspect of this game, which is what you just said too.
Yeah, I think so too. If I had a belief in anyone in Penn State's skill core to, or at least I'm talking receivers specifically, to get open against Notre Dame's DBs, then maybe I would Drew Aller throwing it, because Drew Aller, when he's right, has the ability to make some very high level throws. Some of the touchdown passes he threw like in the back of the end zone against Boise State were really impressive. We all know, I think we know that he's got the potential to be a pretty special thrower at times. And he's a big guy with strong arm. Like it all makes sense. And Riley Leonard just doesn't have that. Like Riley Leonard, there's nothing impressive about the way Riley Leonard throws the ball, if I'm being honest about it. But if any of the skill sets of these quarterbacks would be described as bordering on like exceptional, I mean, exceptional is too strong, but pretty high level, I would probably go Riley Leonard's ability to run first over Drew Aller's throwing ability right now, just because Drew is not, while he can calibrate it and at times look pretty good, he's not super consistent with it.
He's viewed as like, if he said he's coming back in 2025, but who knows what's actually going to happen. He certainly could change his mind. Again, a lot of people would view him as the 3rd best quarterback in this draft if he comes out. And again, it's just weird to me that it's like, oh man, that guy who was 13 of 25 for 171 yards versus Boise, and that guy who was 13 of 22 for 127 yards versus SMU, the NFL can't wait to get their hands on that guy. But that's the truth. Mm-hmm. That's the reality. And so when you look at Drew Aller this year, and again, I've been trying to roll around in my head, could that be the thing? That it's like when it comes down to it, Drew Aller is the guy who can make 3 throws to win this game. He was 30 of 43 for 391 yards in overtime against USC when they had to have it. He threw 2 touchdowns in that game. He also threw 3 picks in that game. His only other 300-yard game this year is against Kent State. He has 7 games where he had passing yards in the 200s, 6 games where he had passing yards in the hundreds. He's 62nd in the nation in passing yards per game, but yet the traits are viewed in a way that like this guy is special, and it's not statistically there. It's not consistently there, but it is occasionally there. That you admit, right? Like you would say that.
Yeah,
like
definitely.
We've seen it.
Yeah.
We've definitely seen it. So I did ask Andy Koltelnicki about this, and it's been my main thing all year. We had Audrey Snyder on the show in the middle of the season, and I sort of asked, like, could Drew Aller throw it to win it if need be? And that was maybe a week or 2 before the USC game. It was like, yeah, he can. Here it is. So I kind of asked Andy Koltelnicki, the OC, a version of that question about Drew Aller.
last time that you look at a game where that needed to happen was probably back there, and he stepped up and did a heck of a job. People look at that game, and gosh, it seems so long ago now. It's kind of a big boy game there. You know what I mean? Kind of grew up a little bit, and you can see, hey, put this team on back. And I'm not just talking about his ability to throw, but his ability to evade rush, to keep plays alive, which is showing up on film a ton, which is probably the thing that he's in this year that he's done better than he has in the past. Is his ability to use feet, keep plays alive, while keeping his eyes down the field. So I got a ton of confidence if it has to happen like that he can get it done. Him and all the guys at the perimeter. But I'm just telling you, Complementary Football says that if you want to win, you need to have balance. You need to have balance.
How do you evaluate him for the first 2 games of the playoffs?
Drew really good. Some of the things we're talking about, people ask about creativity and stress and multiple personnel and all that stuff that we do. The fact that he doesn't get enough credit for managing that stuff. We do all that stuff because Drew allows us to do that stuff. And through the years, I've had plenty of different quarterbacks, and some can handle that, and some can't. And you don't do it if they can't. And so if he can handle that, he's got a big brain, and he loves football, and all the things that is required to be the quarterback.
I thought that was an interesting point by Andy Koltelnicki, that it's like Andy Koltelnicki likes to do a bunch of crazy stuff, and Drew Aller makes sure that they can do it, right? Mm-hmm. Which I do think is something as a second-year starter, as a third-year quarterback. Again, the beginning of that question, I said to him, USC, he did it, and that's what he said. That's been a while ago, but that was a big boy game for him. So I think that's out there, and I do think it's not running, but I do think his legs come into that. You're talking about some of the plays where he can move around the pocket and then throw. I think he could make 3 plays in this game where there's a little bit pressure. He hangs in. That actually maybe is how Penn State guys can get open on a little bit of a broken play. And all of a sudden there's Drew Aller with a 21-yard pass down the middle of the field because he stepped up in the pocket and ripped it. He can do that.
He can definitely do it. I was looking at we reference sometimes the big time throw stuff from PFF.
Yes.
There's been a slight increase for that. Drew Aller last year, 2.9% of his throws were big time throws. This year, it's 5.2%. It went from 12 last year to 20 this year. But in the Boise State game, he had 4. In the Big Ten championship game, he had 3. So that's 7 in 2 games when he had 12 all of last year. I think he's improved a lot as a quarterback. I'm not trying to. I'm not in the camp of Drew Aller's not a good quarterback. I actually think he's pretty good. And if he had good skill, good receivers, people would think about him differently. And I also if you want to say that if I think Riley Leonard's running ability is maybe slightly better or maybe more reliable than Drew Aller's passing right now, I think it's also true that Aller is probably a slightly better runner than Leonard is a thrower. If you were to rank the 4, if you go Riley legs, Aller arm, Aller legs, Leonard arm, I think that's probably fair. So you take the aggregate of the 2 and you like Drew Aller, I wouldn't fight you too much on that.
I also think he's probably the best quarterback that Notre Dame has faced. They played Tyler Shuck from Louisville, who was 24-41 for 264 and 3 TDs. They played Jaden Maeva, the young guy at USC, who lit it up, 27 of 39 for 360, also threw 2 killer picks right at the end. Curtis Rourke from Indiana, they pretty much handled in the playoff, 20 of 33 for 215, but a lot of that was sort of coming back once Notre Dame had a big lead. I don't know that it's the best passing offense that Notre Dame's defense has faced, but I think it's the best individually talented throwing quarterback. So I do think there's something to that, and I am kind of super curious of, will there be a throw or 2 when it really matters that's Drew Aller made a throw to win the game? I definitely think that's out there. What won the game for Penn State? Drew Aller made a throw in the 4th quarter on 3rd and 7 that won in the game.
I think he has that ceiling. I'm just waiting for it. His second half against USC was great. If he can tap back into whatever he found in the second half of that USC game, that's a dangerous quarterback.
Yes.
I think of the Will Howard has played the best in the playoff, I think, of all the quarterbacks, but I think Aller has the highest ceiling of all the remaining quarterbacks if he can find that stride, right? So that's always going to be in the back of your mind. Is this the game where it's going to happen?
The other thing I did ask Andy Koltelnicki about, trying to find the balance of creativity, but also just kind of doing what you do best. I didn't use the too cute phrase that a lot of people were bringing out in the Boise State game of Andy Koltelnicki getting too cute. My point is he is cute. Like, that's how he got here. That's what part of why he's here. And he did say, like, you have to balance that. But he said he's been on both sides of it. There have been times when he's been too cute. There have been times when he's been too vanilla and just put it on like, hey, talent's going to win this. I think in this game, with the soundness of Notre Dame's defense 1 through 11, I actually think cute will help. Are you concerned that he might get too cute? Or I actually think this might be the exact kind of defense you want to be cute against.
I'm always concerned that he's going to get too cute, but
Okay.
but I don't know. I don't think I disagree that it might be useful here. Again, it's like when you're playing a defense that's as sound as Notre Dame's. Does the cuteness give you an edge, or does the cuteness just like lean into like we're not being tricked by that kind of stuff? I don't know how that's going to go. But you have to do what you have to do what got you here. You have to do what got Andy Koltenicki to the job. So I'm not saying button it up. I'm always, like I said, I think in the Boise State game, it's like time and place. It's like I don't think you had to do the play where you ran the double pass to Drew Aller when you did it. I don't hate that you ran it. It's when you ran it. So I think he has to be a little more cognizant of when he's going to unveil it, but definitely has to have some stuff for this game.
He was asked specifically about that play where, again, they had Ty Warren at quarterback. He threw back, right? Whatever it was. And he said, like, they got a bad look defensively for that. Like, it wasn't going to work against that look. And he's kind of like, oh, what are you going to do? So, and it's like, well, that's like it's like, oh, what are you going to do? It's like, well, I don't know. Maybe lose the game because you called that play. So,
right.
You know, but he is who he is. All right, let's flip it. Riley Leonard's run it really well in the playoff, but Notre Dame can't run it otherwise. And I think it's quite a thing for this game. Riley Leonard in the playoff, 11 designed runs for 69 yards, 4 scrambles for 20 yards. So he's run for 89 yards in the 2 games. He was 14 for 80 against Georgia. The rest of Notre Dame was 23 for 74, 3.2 yards per carry against Georgia. Against Indiana, Jeremiah Love had a 98-yard run. Every other carry for Notre Dame, they were 34 for 95, 2.8. I am curious about Notre Dame's ability with the Jeremiah Love health, but also everything else to run the ball with their running backs in this game.
I am too. This isn't the best rushing defense that Notre Dame has faced, at least like statistically. Indiana is actually a little bit better than Penn State, but I actually think this is the best run defense that Notre Dame has faced. I'm not going to get too caught up in the difference. Like Indiana's 3rd and Penn State's 8th in like yards per carry allowed. I think we have enough evidence to think that Penn State's a little better at stopping the run. They're fast, they're athletic, they're big, pretty big on the defensive line at the tackle position, or bigger than they typically have been. And that, like, a lot of that's a Jeremiah Love health conversation, I think. But I don't think they blocked Georgia very well in that game. Like I thought Georgia's defensive line made it pretty clear pretty early that they were going to be the ones who held up their end of the bargain in that particular matchup. And I think Penn State, while I don't know, Penn State's defensive line with a healthy Abdul Carter, I think, is better than Georgia's. But without a healthy Abdul Carter, maybe it's a little more even. But I think there's an opportunity for Penn State to control this game up front. But if you look like through the season, the games where Notre Dame has struggled to run the ball with its backs, that's when you start to see the uptick in Riley Leonard rushing attempts. So there's an answer there for Notre Dame. And I don't know off the top of my head how many teams Penn State has faced that will want to run the quarterback the way that Notre Dame does. So that'll be a new wrinkle for them to contend with too. Because like I've said this in a few big game breakdowns about Penn State. I don't think they're a particularly sound defense. They miss a ton of tackles.
They do.
They fell even. Like I was worried about that against Boise State. You know how many missed tackles Forrest Ashton Genty had against Penn State?
I don't.
16.
Okay.
Like they crowded the line of scrimmage a ton, but like they were missing him a lot. And I think that number in the last 3 games for Penn State's defense now was like north of 50 in terms of missed tackles because of it was like 27 overall against Boise. So maybe that worries you a little less if you're not getting a healthy Jeremiah Love and, you can try to contain Jadarian Price. But we had a 5-minute conversation yesterday about how good Riley Leonard is at avoiding contact and making guys miss. I think if Penn State tackles well, they're going to win. I think it could be as simple as that because I think the advantage on the line belongs to Penn State here on Penn State's defense against Notre Dame's offensive line.
Okay, I asked Mike Denbrock about that. I asked how he thought Notre Dame's offensive line handled Georgia, and then what that means for this game against Penn State. Here's Mike Denbrock.
Spots, obviously, where I thought we could have done a little bit better job, but I thought overall we were really solid. I thought as many, games and different things that they do to try to, pick people off and create kind of free rushers and things like that. I thought we passed off a lot of that stuff really well. It's something that we've done a good job of throughout the season of being able to really protect Riley, and Riley's done a nice job of understanding when it's time to get the ball out of his hand as well.
How good is his decision-making on when to run, when to maybe throw it away, when to hang in a little bit? As a veteran QB, how do you think he handles all that?
Yeah, I think he's got a really good feel for that. I think that's one of the strengths of his game is to understand, hey, as the season's gone along, I think he's gotten better and better and better at, hey, this is, this pass play that Denbrock called is a disaster. Let me just ditch it. We'll live to fight another down instead of, what I mean? And then when there's opportunities for him to use his legs, he's done that really well and extended drives and helped us make explosive plays as well. So I love where he's at mentally and with his decision-making right now where that's concerned.
You faced some really good defenses this year. The challenge with Penn State, especially their guys who can get after the passer, is do they attack? Do they try to rush the passer in a similar way to Georgia? Is it a different approach?
I think there's some similarities there. I just think they're built, with their 2 edge guys in particular. Well, I could put probably 3 or 4 edge guys in there because even the guys that they rotate in are pretty dynamic on the edge of their defense. So they get after you and they force you. They do things up front with what they do scheme-wise to try to isolate those guys in pass rush situations, and those guys have done a nice job of taking advantage of that.
I think Anthony Knapp at left tackle and Emil Wagner at right tackle for Notre Dame have handled some of that stuff in the past, and they can. I don't think they're going to get destroyed by that. But man, we can start going down the list here, Landis. So I just like to reset where I think we might be. Okay. Notre Dame's not a great throwing team, right? So they have averaged 189 passing yards per game. That's 108th in the nation. So that's not what they do best. They haven't run it very well with their backs the past couple games. The Jeremiah Love injury is a big part of that. And we think Penn State's front might be a problem for Notre Dame to handle at least part of the time. So the game plan is 36 carries for Riley Leonard. We're checking. Well, they can't. We don't know if they can do this. We don't know if they can do that. It's like, what can we believe in the Riley Leonard run game? We've talked about that a ton, but what else? That's what I'm curious about, because again, this is one of those Notre Dame. I thought Notre Dame, it is Penn State's better than Georgia, by the way. Do we have to explain this to people? Penn State's better than Georgia. I thought Notre Dame had everything it needed against Georgia. I'm not sure if they do against Penn State. And by the way, Notre Dame scored 2 touchdowns against Georgia. One was a kickoff return. One was a short field off a strip sack. And otherwise they kicked 3 field goals. So this offense with its limitations, with the injuries, moving the ball against Penn State, I wonder
too. I think you might need a surprise splash from a Jordan Faison or maybe a Mitchell Evans. Evans is particularly interesting to me. He's not really had the season I thought he would have, but there's a lot of potential there with him. Maybe they can get him loose a little bit in this game, try to match some of what Penn State hopes to do with Tyler Warren with I think, not an all the way similar tight end, but I think a potential game breaker in tight end at Mitchell Evans too. So it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. Like it's going to require a lot of Riley Leonard, just like the Sugar Bowl did. And he very well may be held to under 100 yards passing again. I think Notre Dame can still win a game that way, but the margin for error is pretty small.
I teased this on Tuesday night. Tom Allen saying the guy on there on the Penn State defensive line that other coaches are always saying, like, man, that guy, Zane Durant in the middle, that as good as Denai Dennis Sutton and Abdul Carter are at edge. Like Zane Durant is really impactful up the middle, like has a good number of pressures. I just think he's disruptive. And then Keziah Izzard is there too. He split a double team in the SMU game and like forced a pick, I think. Like they really, and then again, Smith Vilbert and Amin Vanover, who came in and played really well when Abdul Carter was out. They can run multiple guys at you. Again, I think the Notre Dame offensive line is good, just like I think the Penn State offensive line is good. But I do think when it comes to the dudes on the defensive line in this game, because Riley Mills is out, Notre Dame had some guys step up. But Abdul Carter's Abdul Carter. If he's going to do this, if he can play and be some version of himself, I think that is a potentially game-changing thing. And I do think, do you agree with this statement? Against Georgia, Notre Dame had enough. All they had to do was be themselves. Against Penn State, Notre Dame might have to be a little more than themselves to win.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm a little surprised that that's how I think. Like when we were making our picks in the bracket beforehand, like I was kind of like, oh, Oregon, Notre Dame in the national title game. I thought Notre Dame and Penn State would play each other, but like a month ago, I was sort of like Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
And then like Riley Mills got hurt and Jeremiah Love's been hurt. And
yeah,
now that we're here in the moment.
Yeah, it's when it's become too much. Yeah.
And that we talked about with Pete Sampson from The Athletic, like before the Georgia game, was Riley Mills, the one that's too much. And it wasn't. As we talked, Gabriel Rubio played really well, and then Howard Cross did his thing, and they filled in, and the linebackers tackled all that. But is Jeremiah Love in this game, is that too much? I think he played 17 snaps in the last game. Like they need him, and this might be it, because but it also might not, because it's not like Penn State's it's not gonna be a track meet. It's 44 and a half. I think the total started at 46 and has moved to 44 and a half. And so it's not going to be 44, 42 for a final. So Methodical might win. Do you think Methodical could win?
I definitely think Methodical could win. Yeah, I think Methodical defense and special teams can get you a win in this game.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. You want to make picks?
Can I ask you one more question?
Yeah.
You may have touched on it, so I apologize if you did. Any talk about Howard Cross and his health? He had to leave the Sugar Bowl for a bit and then came back. Is there any concern that he's not going to be himself in this game?
Have not heard that.
Okay.
No, have not heard that. That, I mean, again, like what, injury number 14 for Notre Dame?
Yeah.
Like, what do you get? Like, they're playing third stringers already and still finding a way to be one of the Final Four teams. But no, that is not, I have not heard a big discussion topic around that. Maybe because you're a better reporter than me. You know more about it in Dallas than I do here poolside in Fort Lauderdale. So thanks for showing me up, Landis. Okay. When we come back, we're going to do what you're watching, what you're eating, what you're thinking. We're also going to make picks for the Orange Bowl after this on KOTN. Doug Lesmerises live at the Tiki Bar. Bill Landis live in Dallas. Do you do this when I kind of always used to get mad about this when national people would show up I was on the Ohio State beat and focused on one team, and then they'd show up and be like, "Hey, what's going on?" And I'd be like, why would I tell you? I'm here gathering the information for 8 months for my coverage. Interloper. Now I'm an interloper. So all for 2 days, I've been like, "Hey, what do you think is going to happen? Expert?" I didn't decide. I was eating breakfast this morning. I was doing the news conference. I was like, well, I guess I better go up to my room and decide who I think is going to win this game. Like I've been watching film, I've been looking up stats, I've been trying to analyze everything. I'm a little surprised at where I arrived, but maybe I'm more surprised that I didn't arrive here sooner. And I'm going to pick Penn State to win this game.
Okay.
I have a low-scoring, close game, and I'm going to make sure I say it because I think at times I forget to say my score when it's like time for picks, and then people listening on the podcast are like, you didn't say it, you dunderhead. 23-16 Penn State. What is your score?
I'm rolling with Notre Dame, who at the outset of this I did pick to win the national championship. I feel far less confident in that given some of the injuries that Notre Dame has now encountered in this playoff. But I think they have enough on defense to keep their offense in the game. And maybe they're going to need a special team spark like they got against Georgia with a kickoff return for a touchdown. But I think they're capable of finding that too. So I have a low scoring game as well. I have Notre Dame 23-20. So we have the same winning total.
I think Penn State has a higher ceiling, but also a lower floor. And it goes back a little bit to, I think Notre Dame's got something going on. I think they're totally connected. I think they've maximized every part of their season. I think they have overcome injuries. I think they are well coached on both sides of the ball. But I think Penn State has a few more dudes. I think maybe Marcus Freeman is situated to make the call or two that gets Notre Dame over the top, but I also think Abdul Carter and Dennis Sutton and Drew Aller and Ty Warren and Nick Singleton and Katron Allen are probably more situated to make the play or two that gets Penn State over the top. And I do not think that James Franklin, he has been an incredibly successful coach at Penn State. You establish a standard, and then all of a sudden you're so good you wind up getting criticized for winning 10 games, which is where Paul "I'm not okay" bomb started with James Franklin at the beginning of the year. And it's like, is Ole Miss in a semifinal? Is Ole Miss in a semifinal? No. So who would you rather be? So James Franklin's done a great job. I don't think he's incapable of doing this, but it's just like, I think maybe Notre Dame, I think, maybe has a little more vibe around it, a little more team of destiny. Yeah. But I think if we're doing a dude draft and Jeremiah Love is hurt, and with all the guys that Notre Dame has lost over the course of the season, I think if we were starting a dude draft, I think we might go 5 deep before we got to a Notre Dame guy. If we're dude drafting this game and Abdul Carter is some version of himself.
Do you want to do a dude draft real quick?
Let's do a dude draft real quick. I'm going to assume that Abdul Carter is a pretty good version of himself. I'll take him first.
See, I would take Xavier Watts second, but then I think the next 4 picks might be Penn State guys.
Well said. Ty Warren, Penn State tight end.
Yeah. I might go Nick Singleton after that. Yeah.
And then I might go Katron Allen.
Yeah.
For Penn State, the 2 running backs. And this is, again, acknowledging that we just think maybe Jeremiah Love is not able to be himself.
Mm-hmm.
And then now we're getting into Dennis Sutton territory. And I think
Leonard Moore would be pretty high up for Notre Dame.
He's
Leonard
a very
Moore's
good player.
Really well.
I think AJ Harris, though, for Penn State, their corner is probably pretty high up there too. So that's where we're so that kind of is going to change it for me. Part of this is a belief that I think Abdul Carter will be able to be a version of himself, and I'm not sure Jeremiah Love will be able to be a version of himself. But again, Vanover played great in Abdul Carter's place, but I do think Carter being special is sort of a get them over the top thing for them here. And I don't think Notre Dame did everything they had to do against Georgia, and also Georgia screwed stuff up. And I just Penn State. I think Penn State's going to have to screw a couple things up to give Notre Dame an opportunity to swoop in. And that absolutely could happen. Absolutely. And it could be one of those where James Franklin tries to be bold too much, and all of a sudden, he's going forward at his own 39-yard line on 4th and 2 in the middle of the 3rd quarter because he's trying to prove something. It's like, dude, you're up by 6, punt it away here. And it's like, oh no, they called a perfect play, and then some guy fell down, and all of a sudden now there's a short field for Notre Dame, and here we are. So I think that's on the board, but I just think Penn State has a little more. But I am not confident in this pick. Are you confident in your Notre Dame pick?
No. I asked you before the show started if I could pick a tie. but I guess we can do that.
Yeah, so I think it's going to be a good game for the North. But again, it's like one of these things. Again, like these are two really talented teams that are not going away. I don't think this is a one and done opportunity for either of these programs, and I think there could be versions of these, even better versions of Penn State and Notre Dame down the road. But they are very good versions right now. They are not perfect versions. They are very good versions right now, though. And so I'm expecting a good low-scoring game. I'd take the under. We're both taking the under here, right?
Yeah, I'm under. Yeah, was it 45 and a half? Yeah.
Yeah. So okay, those are our picks. What you watching? What you eating? What you thinking? You been able to watch anything besides ball lately?
I watched a movie on the flight back from LA last week. No Hard Feelings. Are you aware of it? Are you familiar with this film?
Is that the Jennifer Lawrence movie?
Yeah.
I am aware. I watched it. Saw it in the theater.
Oh, you did? I didn't like it. I think it was funny.
Oh, I did like it. Oh,
I mean, I liked parts of it. I shouldn't say I didn't like it. That's true. I didn't. It was a fine watch. But I remember when it came out, it was like, oh, we're bringing back raunchy comedies, and it was like, I thought it under delivered a little bit on that.
Oh, interesting. Okay, can I tell you a little story about that movie? It's not really very good. It's not a very good story.
Yeah.
We were at Epcot one day, like the year before that movie came out. And do you know who Joshua Bassett is? He's kind of had like a thing with Olivia Rodrigo. I think they used to date, and then they had like a rap battle. I don't know. Have you ever heard the name Joshua Bassett?
I do not know who this man is. No, I just Googled him. Yeah.
So he's kind of famous. And so he was walking through Epcot, and my daughters recognized him. We're like, oh my gosh, it's Joshua Bassett, and like followed him. And then a line of teen girls started following Joshua Bassett through Epcot. And then he stopped and he took pictures with everybody. He was very, very kind about it. But he was with a friend of his. And nobody else recognized the friend, but my daughters did, because he had been on Broadway and had done some things. Like might have been in Dear Evan Hansen or something. And so they were like, oh, can we take pictures with this guy too, who to everybody else was just Joshua Bassett's anonymous friend. And it's the guy who's in the movie with Jennifer Lawrence, like the other star of that movie was that guy.
Yeah, I like him. I did think my favorite part.
I like him.
Yeah, my favorite part of that movie was when they're in the restaurant and he plays the piano and he sings Man Eater, because it was an incredible cover of Man Eater. It was great. He's got a lovely voice. And then I learned after that he's like, he's a Broadway guy, so it made sense. I just thought it was like, it was it's a movie. You have to suspend disbelief, and they're trying to cram a lot in the 2 hours. I understand that. It was like way too convenient that like this kid who is a recluse is suddenly gonna like, oh yeah, I should go on a date with a stranger that I just met. Like it's nonsensical. So like, but I guess I understand they had to get to that point for the plot of the entire movie to work. But like it was fine. I definitely laughed sometimes. I was just expecting to laugh a little more for a movie that was kind of, I thought, out there with its we're bringing back the old school kind of comedy that I thought it didn't quite hit that note.
Yeah, I find Jennifer Lawrence is charming. I think she's good. It was like,
I like Jennifer Lawrence. Like,
in her career arc, it's like she's the Hunger Games person. Like, what are you talking about? To me, like, she is super famous. Then it's like, aren't you too famous to be in a movie like this? But it was like at that point in her career when it's like, let's do this, and it's like, okay. But
she had some pretty good comedic beats. It was fine. It was fine. It just wasn't. I wanted to be like guffawing on the plane, and that didn't happen.
Oh, I apologize. Okay. Yeah. Have you watched Carry On Netflix, the Jason Bateman movie?
I haven't, because I was talking to somebody about it the other day, and they said, like, if you're flying a lot and you're a nervous flyer, you shouldn't watch it before you get on an airplane.
I bet you they don't show that on an airplane. It is totally about bombs on an airplane. Sorry. Whoop. That's how Bill drove back from Dallas. Pretty good. Again, it's weird to me how movies come to be, but it's like the guy like that. What's his name? Taron Egerton. I don't know what his name is.
Taron Egerton.
Taron Egerton. Like he's like the star of it, and then it's like Jason Bateman. It's like, why is anybody doing this? But it's just funny. It's like I thought it was good. It's kind of like a Die Hard in an airport kind of thing, but also kind of weird. But I don't know. I liked it.
I want to watch
liked
it. No, I have it. It's on the list to watch. I just want to look. We're in a mode where I don't ever fly, but we happen to be in a month where I'm flying 15 times. So I'm gonna wait until that's over and then I'll watch it.
Yeah. Your wife is in the chat angry that I've made you live in Dallas because that's it. Jason Bateman, wherever Bill is right this moment, he's never leaving. He's never getting in another mode of transportation ever again. What are you eating?
I actually ate this yesterday. There's like a little like fried chicken place down here in this complex where the hotel is, and it's just like the thing that was open next door, and I was hungry. But they had an appetizer that was fried cornbread. I love cornbread, big cornbread guy. But they like cubed it up and then deep fried it and like served it with like this little side of honey butter that I don't know if one person's supposed to use the entire cup of honey butter, but I sure did.
Oh.
It was quite tasty. Like I like cornbread because I think cornbread can be a starter or a dessert. Like it has functionality. It has functionality, I think, in different courses of a meal
or side right along with it.
Like, I appreciate that versatility. But I had never had it deep fried before. So like you got the softness that you normally get with a piece of cornbread, but like there was a little bit of a crunch to it that I liked.
Wow. Top 4 answers on the board. Here's the question. Name a food that could be a starter, a side, or a dessert. Might be top 1 answer on the board. You can't eat a brownie as a side.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Pour one out for cornbread. When I eat barbecue, I always get a side of cornbread. Oh my God. It's so good.
Yeah. I like corn. We had some chili the other day for dinner. I like cornbread with chili too.
Yeah. No, tremendous. Oh man. Can you bring some cornbread home?
Sure. Yeah. I'll drive it back from Dallas.
Yeah. Where are you on salmon?
Not a salmon guy.
I think you might come around. I think my daughter, as a young person, really enjoys a piece of salmon. I've really come around on it. It is like when you're out to eat, I think you have to. I'm not good at making salmon at home, but that is like they had salmon here for the media meal. Man, salmon, brother. Like it's just, you got to grab it when it's there. If you get the right glaze on it, you trust the kitchen, glaze this thing up to make it taste good. I'm not a big fish eater, but salmon sometimes is like salmon and rice right there. Bang. Just nails it every time. I would invite you to open your mind to salmon. And to all of our viewers and listeners, if you're not there, I'm a picky eater. I was like a plain hamburger guy for the first 45 years of my life, but it's like I'm there on salmon now. And when it hits, like good salmon is good. And then I'm like always saying to my wife, like, this is good for me, right? Like this is good for me. It's like I want it to be a bonus. Because if it tastes good and it's good for me, woo. Unlike cornbread, for instance.
Yeah, I'm not a big fish eater either, but I prefer a milder fish. I like salmon is a little too fishy for me. Like the smell kind of gets to me. I have tried it and it's not for me. I like a mild white fish if I'm eating fish.
There you go. Yeah. All right, what are you thinking about?
Why do people rush to the bathroom on an airplane right when they turn on the fasten seatbelt sign as we're beginning our descent to our destination? It freaks me out. I don't like it. Like you had the entire flight to go take a leak. You decided in the last 20 minutes of the flight that you have to rush to the front of the plane as we're beginning our descent. It just makes me a little uncomfortable. And it's like, I don't know that falls under like the social contract thing, where we're all just like trying to help each other feel a little more comfortable in our lives. Cause maybe it's a very reasonable thing to try to go to the bathroom at that point on a plane. And I'm just a nervous flyer. But as I'm working to become less and less of a nervous flyer, that is still the one thing. It's like, you need to sit down. We're going to be on the ground. Yeah. We're going to be on the ground in 15 minutes. Just like take your seat. We'll be there. And then you can use the bathroom in the airport. That is quite the cockpit.
That is quite a societal conflict between the nervous flyers and the I gotta pee crowd.
Yeah.
Because as a member of the I gotta pee crowd, as a man in my 50s, there's times when you're like, I don't have to go. And then like 90 seconds later is like, I gotta go. And the realization of like, because sometimes you can think it's just 20 minutes. You're going to be off this plane in 20 minutes. Like the 20 minutes is not going to happen here. So then you're starting to make choices. And it's, I either can rush the bathroom or we can deal with something else. right at the end of this flight. So, but you have to plan ahead. And as a member of the I Gotta Pee crowd, it's like the whole point is you got to pee before you got to pee. So be responsible on behalf of the nervous flyers. Take care of your business before the last minute so you're not rushing around and putting people on edge. So I'm with you.
Okay. I don't mind. Yeah, you got to go during a flight. You got to go. That's fine.
Yeah.
It's just like ding, the light comes on beginning of the descent, and then somebody like super hurriedly rips off their seatbelt and books it to the front of the plane. Like, what's happening? It's like, oh, they're just going to pee. It's like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I get it. So you got to plan ahead. When you get to this age, you got to plan ahead. This was actually, how many syllables are in the word mile or in the word fire in your mind?
1.
Okay. This was like a whole plot point. It wasn't a whole plot point, but it was a discussion on a show that I'm watching, The Diplomat, which again, tremendous show on Netflix with Kerry Russell. And my wife and I like paused it to have a discussion because they were talking about is fire 1 syllable or 2. And we had a discussion about it. And then after we unpaused it, they went and talked about it on the show. But we had this conversation like previously in my house. Like there's a lot of people. There are certainly some people who think that it's fire or mile, and that's 2 syllables. And I don't believe that to be true. I think it's fire and mile. And as I often remind my wife, I did have a linguistics concentration in college. And so I do like to talk about the evolution of language and like how things change and like, is something really right or wrong? Or is it just something like as society adapts? It's 1 syllable though. It's not fire. There's not a Y in the word fire. So again, like sometimes you're just sitting around in your 50s and you're like, do you want to talk about syllables? It's like, what's left? We got anything else to talk about? Let's talk about how many syllables are on this word. So I just want to check in with you.
I think it's important to learn that about the people around you too. I was not a linguistics concentration in college, but I did do hooked on phonics when I was in grade school. So I think that makes me an expert. I think it's 1 syllable, both words, 1 syllable.
I would advise, I was going to say like I would advise our audience to ask the people that their loved ones, do you think it's 1 syllable or 2? But actually probably don't do that because it is the kind of conversation, depending on the mood that people are in, you can get in an actual fight about this. Like this is, and it's just language, but like there's no Y in those words. So it's 1 syllable. Okay. We'll do a big game breakdown on Thursday's show on Ohio State, Texas. You ready to do this? You're going to lead us on that. Do you have a handle on Ohio State, Texas right now? Or are you still digging in?
I'm still digging in a little bit. I feel like I have a little bit more of a handle on that than I did this game though. I'm going to talk to some more of those guys tonight too. So that'll help inform my decisions.
Yeah. So I will look forward to that. We will then look forward to a post-game show Thursday. I also think we're going to have T-Shu come on the Thursday show. No separate betting show this week, but I think T-Shu will be part of the Thursday show to give his favorite bets for these 2 semifinals. And Landis and I can chime in with our 2 favorite bets as well. So you can, if you want a little bit of that hook, but also by our scores. The one thing we told you so far is we think the Orange Bowl is going under. So if you dabble, you might want to dabble there. As always, thanks to our producer, Mike Urostowski, for making us look good and sound good. Thanks to you guys for being part of it. We're just super excited for these 2 games, and we're fired up for where Northern football is right now. And we're really fired up for this Northern football community. I'm going to go swim. I did bring my suit. You got to have your suit ready unless it's 20 in Dallas. Let me double check. I think it's 66 here in Miami. It's 66. You can swim in at 66. Oh, it's 69 now. I could swim in.
I'm sure the pool's heated. Yeah.
So I'll put some pictures on Instagram for the folks, enjoy that kind of thing. For now, thanks again to you guys for being here. On behalf of Bill Landis, I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Kings of the North.